By political reporter for Politics Home, Tom Scottson, and author and broadcaster Natasha Devon. Great to have your company this Bank Holiday Monday. Thanks both. Let's get straight to it then, shall we? We're going to start with a story inside The Guardian today, and Lucy Powell has been talking. She's been talking about direction of the Labour Party, essentially.
Yes, which I believe is Tom's story.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting because what's happened is Lucy Powell, very close ally to Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester. She's given an interview for The Guardian, and she said that there's no magic bullet for Labour's woes at the moment, and what we're expecting at the local elections is that Labour will lose 75% of their seats. It's going to be a catastrophic loss for the party. They're getting eaten from the left, from the Greens, and the right from Reform. I thought there was a couple of interesting points, though, from Powell. One of them was that, again, there's nothing that can sort this out. There's no one leader that can come in, so it might be a bit of a hit to Burnham. But also quite a funny line towards the end of the piece that she said she was quite sceptical of government reshuffles, and ironically, she was reshuffled out at the last cabinet reshuffle. So an interesting intervention, particularly from someone on the soft left.
Yeah, I mean, she's trying to essentially, from reading this, there's a line, isn't there, between discipline, between delivery, and we've seen on the political rounds that senior figures are having to speak to journalists like us, defend and trying to deliver that message. And I always wonder whether that is about the mounting pressure that must be building within Labour, Natasha.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because Keir Starmer inherited an incredibly fractured Labour Party from Corbyn and kind of presented himself as the man who could bring the various factions together and demand that loyalty. And now we're seeing that disintegrate somewhat.
And it's also interesting, Tom, to the point that you made about the fracturing of that two-party politics that we've all really been so used to, and Labour being, you know, clipped by Reform, being clipped by the Greens and the Lib Dems too. So it will be a particular spin here from Lucy to try to appear not divided, but strong.
And the soft left are clearly in the ascendancy at the moment, especially some of the briefing at the weekend. There's been briefing that Ed Miliband wants the role not of Prime Minister, but of Chancellor, so that would really shift the party in an economically leftward direction. Someone like Lucy Powell is now back in Cabinet, but as a political role because she's Deputy Leader of the party. And I feel that even though such an ally that she is of Andy Burnham, even if he can't come in at maybe a by-election and maybe replace Keir Starmer, there really is a shift in the party towards the direction of the soft left and really trying to placate those voters that have gone to the Greens and could come back.
OK. We're going to go to the front page, actually, of The Guardian now, Natasha. We've spoken so much about facial recognition, particularly its use in London by the Metropolitan Police. Talk to me about this story here, alarm over toothless oversight of AI facial recognition systems.
Well, the reason that this story caught my eye is because it's emblematic, I think, of our attitude to AI more generally, insofar as what facial recognition could do was exaggerated. It's been jumped on, it's been rolled out. It seems that even the Met Police have exaggerated slightly the effectiveness of it. And it's only now that it's been rolled out everywhere that we're starting to consider that perhaps it might not be as effective as we thought it was, or that there might be negative consequences. So a whistleblower, for example, has claimed that this facial recognition technology is being used maliciously, sometimes by people who have a vendetta against certain individuals in communities. There was a South Asian guy who wasn't even in the part of the country at the time when he was arrested for shoplifting. And we know that this kind of technology does tend to work less well on minoritized people. 57%, according to polling, of the public think that this is taking us in a dystopian Big Brother type direction. So it's really important, I think, that we have a conversation about this.
It's interesting, isn't it? The Met are saying that they've scanned more than 1.7 million faces in London, hunting for suspects. On watch lists, they're saying that 87% up on the same period last year. So it's being used increasingly more. It's not going away, is it?
It's not, and I think that there are some concerns about where all of this data is being stored, how it's being stored, who it could potentially be sold to. We know that, for example, Palantir is pretty embedded in a lot of our systems, in our health systems, our security systems and our policing systems here in the UK. I just think there needs to be more transparency so the public understand exactly where their faces are going, frankly.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting. Keep a watch on that. Let's move on to, it's the front page of the Eye. State pensions, Tom, triple lock, under threat in the UK. If the UK goes to war with Putin, it's always so sensitive, isn't it? Pensions, whichever way you look at it. Talk me through this story and why it's so important.
So I guess that what really caught my eye is that I think that the kind of mood now, particularly not just MPs but the public now, is looking towards a more graver situation on the global scale, not just obviously in the Middle East and Iran, but also the war in Ukraine and whether that could potentially spread. Now, I think there's been a real kind of more grown-up conversation, and we've seen this now just in the left and the right, that defence spending needs to increase. The government has set this out that it wants an ambition of 3.5%, but will that be enough? I think most figures, not just obviously on the right, but just the left, also think that it needs to increase. But where's that money going to come from? Because you look at the polling, most people don't want to spend more of their taxes towards defence, so it's got to come from the existing pot. And you look at the state pension, most political parties, bar the Greens, which was an interesting line.
Yeah, they're the only parties who officially say, listen, we'd scrap the triple lock.
Yeah, which also was incredibly surprising. But I just see now, I don't think the triple lock and much of the state pension will be the only thing that need to cut if they're going to do more for personnel and kit spending. So I think this is going to be a story that won't be the last front page that we'll see of this kind.
No, it also sparks conversation, doesn't it, Natasha, about warfare and welfare and where that lies. And traditionally, Labour have been on the side, traditionally, of welfare.
And we must be in a really dire situation if we're even having this conversation in the first place. I remember reading Lord Willett's book a few years ago now, where he talked about how the baby boomer generation are so massive and disproportionately represented in society that politicians will pretty much give them whatever they want, because if they can get their vote, then they'll win an election. The fact that we're talking about the triple lock, you know, there must be a real threat there.
Yeah, and there is a conversation, I think it was Angela Rayner at the end of last week, that was talking a bit about how younger people, Generation Z, there's not a focus, Tom, on supporting them, on supporting their, you know, jump onto the property ladder, into stable jobs, and that's a big issue, isn't it, too?
And Natasha is completely right that you've got baby boomers that are very influential electorally, and that's why politicians will look to kind of support that generation as opposed to younger people that don't necessarily vote. And you look at it, housing costs are through the roof, the cost of living, and it looks like at the moment, and I think this is this real apathy within the younger generation that they're not getting many benefits, but we're subsidising maybe older people towards the end of their lives. So I think there's this kind of fear of intergenerational inequality that's going to perpetuate through the next few years.
A really interesting interview, actually, in the Eye paper. We're going to move on now. And it's a former lawyer of Donald Trump who's calling for the president, essentially, to be removed from office because he's turned into, a quote, a madman.
Yeah, this is Ty Cobb, who worked very closely with Trump during the first administration. He actually cites a combination of things: the cognitive decline of the president, but also that in this second term, he appears to have surrounded himself by people who won't challenge him. There are no guardrails this time. And he says that the United States is in an incredibly precarious situation as a result, to which everybody who's been paying attention will say, duh.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? We're often used to seeing, Tom, those Truth Social posts from the president, often in caps, often misspelt. The diplomacy around what we're used to seeing from the White House is starkly different, as Natasha said, from the first time round. And now we have a lawyer, former lawyer here, saying he's essentially unfit for office. And there'll always be distractors, I suppose, on the opposite side saying that he needs to go. Yeah,
and I feel that this sort of criticism is justified. I mean, we're looking at not just this report and some of the damning evidence, but you hear of journalists phoning up Trump just an hour before bed. He's got none of his confidants near him and he just picks up the phone and will talk to journalists. It's happened to Mark Stone, our US correspondent, who has one of Donald Trump's mobile phone numbers, and he can essentially pick it up. And he said, what's really remarkable is that you don't go through administrators or any kind of clearing. The only stipulation is that it's not recorded. But because of that, Mark Stone said that he
appears more relaxed, freer to talk about things.
But I
So
guess-
it's remarkable,
yeah.
that side of it.
I mean, it's incredible, and you could never imagine, I mean, the amount of criticism that someone like Joe Biden or Barack Obama would have got if they had done something like that, just, you know, a small fraction of it, and then you've got someone like President Trump who picks up the phone, can speak freely, and has got no sort of press barrier or filter that his team can try, and it's incredibly scary that the most powerful person in the world can speak that freely.
Yeah. And it's also interesting, as we look forward to the midterms in November, what that will mean for Donald Trump and his campaign in the Middle East continues as well.
I mean, his team are scrabbling around to redefine county lines at the moment to try and ensure that he'll do better in the midterms than he would have done. But do you know what I think is interesting is when King Charles visited Washington, how refreshing it was to hear someone speak in sentences.
Natasha, thank you, Tom. Join us after the break.
We're trying to see as much as we can.